Hello. We'll just give it a minute for people to join and we'll make a start.
Yeah, if people have any questions, as always, just pop them down in the chat. We'll try to answer them.
Hi everybody. Hi everybody, we'll make a start in just a second. We're just giving everybody a little minute just to join in. Hi everybody, we're still up at Mirador del Time today. I think hopefully you'll be able to get a good view. We've got a bit of calima today, which is that dust in suspension you get in the Canary Islands. So that has been interfering with the view a little bit. The wind direction has changed as well. So those columns of steam coming off the sea were actually being blown inland. So we thought staying up here was probably a wise idea for today, rather than being down by the coast. And today's a very special day, isn't it, Rosie?
No.
Yes, yes, a very special day today. It's actually Rosie's 21st birthday. So, birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Rosie, happy birthday to you. Feliz, te deseamos todos, cumpleaños feliz. Oh, Rosie, it's her 21st birthday today, and incredibly she's decided to spend it here with us rather than in a very civilised manner back at home. She's kind of regretting it now though, because we've been embarrassing her all day. Everywhere we've been singing happy birthday and clapping and being very Latin, so you won't forget this birthday now, will you, Rosie? Poor Rosie. Oh my goodness. But guys, it's been a bit of a different day today. Not as many connections as we had yesterday, but that's actually been, I think, probably a good thing. We had a slower start, but you've had one or two interviews going on. Ben, you ended up speaking to South Africa today, did you? Was that it was meant to be Rosie's connection? I think you might have overdone lunch. So how did that go?
Yeah, that was really interesting. Obviously, we've been speaking to people all over the world. It's just really interesting to see how much sort of international attention Europe gets, and you know, it's quite interesting as well to just hear about I guess different news channels and their sort of their knowledge on the eruption. So you know, I had a connection I think yesterday. You know, they weren't really that knowledgeable on the eruption, but then you know the person who I spoke to today in South Africa, you know, he sort of in introducing the question, he gave me sort of half of the answer back, which I thought was quite interesting, and I never really thought that it would sort of be big news and be sort of well understood news over there. So that was quite interesting.
Really interesting. And Rosie, you've just had a really interesting connection with your old school. There's quite a few current pupils from your school connected. How did that go?
Yeah, it was like really nice to kind of see my old teachers and kind of give back in the small way that I could, and kind of have a lot of kind of current students from my school and my teachers from my school ask some really interesting questions. So it was kind of also an interesting setup. I was kind of on selfie cam and trying to compete with all the traffic and the people around me. But yeah, there were some great questions from some sixth form students who were kind of asking about how I kind of found it being here. They were asking some really interesting questions on like the media coverage of the eruption and how that's impacted people here and people internationally. So yeah, it was it was really interesting to do, and I got asked kind of different questions to what I've been asked with like different media interviews.
Yeah, the media interviews have been really interesting actually, because there are some channels that have invited us back, which is great because they've obviously wanted some detailed information, some context, and then others who you feel like, you know, they're not that keen to have us back because actually they'd rather sensationalise the story. And I think once we have a bit more time and a bit of sort of calm retrospect, it'll be interesting to analyse that and just see, because you know, it is disappointing when news channels just seem to deliberately try to target a certain type of story. In other words, not report on what's happening, but they're here almost with a package in their head of what they want to say, and they're just finding something to fit that. And we have found that a little bit on occasion. That's a little bit disappointing, isn't it? Yeah. But on the whole, the people you guys have been speaking to have been great, and actually with genuine questions, and most people seem to want to know the same sort of things. You know, how long is this going to go on for? When's it going to stop? And all of that sort of stuff. So we had some questions yesterday of people wanting some basic information on how volcanoes work. So I thought if I ask you both just some very basic questions and just remind people who are interested on how this happens. So. You know, why does a volcano erupt? In very plain language, Ben, what's that about? Why have we got all this stuff coming out, shooting into the sky?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a simple question with an answer that could go on for hours, but I'm going
no
to
thanks, just a simple version.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best to do the simple version. Yeah, so obviously when you know, magma erupts on the surface as lava, you know, that's molten material that's come from the mantle. So you know, the sort of question of why a volcano erupts is answered if you think of, you know, how does magma get from the mantle, you know, up through the crust and onto the surface. And yeah, so the main part of that is you need first you need a part of the mantle that's, you know, that's hotter than the surroundings and that's hotter than the crust. You know, if you recall the simple lessons you probably taught in science at school, that hot air rises, well that's the same with liquids and solids, so that's the same, you know, with magma. It wants to rise up, and what happens is that, yeah, so the magma wants to rise through the surface. Sorry, we were just slightly interrupted there. And as more of this magma accumulates, you know, it puts a lot of pressure on the crust and the rocks around it, and this crust is very, very cold and very brittle. So it fractures, and when it fractures, it creates new paths that the magma can rise in. So basically, the magma then follows the path of least resistance through the crust up to the surface, and then that's where you get the eruption.
So there's a bit of gas involved, like a sort of Coca-Cola bottle. If you shake it up and you spray it, so if you just open the lid on a Coca-Cola bottle, it doesn't go anywhere. No. But if you shake it, you can then spray it. Is that the same sort of idea here? Has that got anything to do with this?
Yeah, so it's more to do with you know, the pressurization of the gas. So the gas is at, you know, obviously high pressure, which acts to push the magma upwards, and then when it reaches the surface, obviously that opens it up to the pressure of the surface, which is very low. So yeah, so as you recall, sort of gas moves from sort of high to low pressure. So if there's low pressure on the surface, high pressure sort of underground where the magma is stored, that pushes the magma up and out onto the surface.
So the gas has quite a big role in volcanic eruptions, and one of the questions I'm asked a lot, and I'm not a scientist so I don't explain very well, why do we sometimes see a grey plume and sometimes we see a white plume? I mean, a couple of days ago we were videoing this volcano and you had two twin plumes. One was very dark grey and one was white. What does that mean?
Yeah, so in this case it has to do with the two vents we have. So we have sort of some higher up central vents where the activity is more explosive, and then we have some lower vents where the activity is, you know, less explosive, and that's important because, you know, when magma rises and, you know, there's an explosion, the magma gets fragmented into, you know, very small sort of ash-sized particles, and that's what causes the grey colour in the in sort of the sort of higher vents that we were seeing.
So it's basically just ash. So the
Yeah.
top one was gas and ash coming up, and then on the side vent, what we now fondly know as Ben's vent, you know, you had the effusive lava coming out, but you had a different colour plume. So
Yeah.
why was that?
Yeah, so basically this lower vent, because it was less explosive, you know, there's a lot less ash in the plume. So then the plume just comes from the gases basically escaping from the magma quite easily.
Without any broken bits of lava ash in there.
Exactly,
so it's just the gas.
Yeah,
I see. And then we had something similar further down the flank, because obviously we were looking out for the lava hitting the sea, which was going to be a white plume, but on the way there was basically dark clouds, and those were sort of what we felt were quite toxic from the banana plantations, so that have some sort of synthetic covering netting on them, and that was really acrid, wasn't it? So again, that was quite an interesting distinguishing factor from a distance. You could tell what was just the steam rising from the lava, and in that steam is these gases that we were talking about as well. So once the eruption starts, what makes it stop, Ben?
Yeah, basically, as I was saying, for the volcano to erupt, you know, one of the main driving forces of that eruption is pressure underground, which forces the magma out, and this comes from both sorts of the magma being less dense than the material around it, and also the gas within it. And basically, as an eruption continues, you know, if you imagine you've got a magma chamber full of magma that's sort of draining magma to the surface, and gas in there as well, as the eruption goes on, presuming there's no more supply to this chamber from below, sort of the pressure in this chamber will decrease. Eventually the pressure will get so low that the magma can't reach the surface, and then you'll see the activity stop.
Interesting. Okay. And you were saying yesterday that the way the lava moves down the flank is basically due to gravity, isn't it? So it's gravity forcing it. It's not like it has some sort of I mean, it can get pushed by the magma coming out, but it's mainly gravity, isn't it, that forces it? So that's what makes it move down the hill.
Yeah, so it'll follow the slope of the flank. Yeah.
So those are sort of questions that your school were asking you today, Rosie, as well.
No, there was questions about the lava hitting the sea.
Yes.
And you know, I think a very similar kind of explanation, kind of trying to keep it as simple as possible, because I think it's really important when you're trying to explain quite a scientific process to kind of use simple terms, and you know, don't just assume that everyone you know has knowledge of volcanoes. But yeah, there was kind of more really interesting questions about the social impacts, economic impacts, and I guess it kind of followed the way geography is taught and how it's kind of set out into primary impacts, secondary impacts. I got asked if I'd been impacted in any way. So yeah, more I guess the social side of it, which I think as as a geographer you kind of see it. You see it for the physical sides, but also the social. That's kind of multiple different ways to look at the eruption.
Yeah. And how do you both feel? I mean, our time on La Palma is coming to an end. We're going to be getting the boat back to Tenerife tomorrow afternoon. When you look back, I mean, it's been quite a journey for both of you, haven't it? From our first arrival here and first feeling that sort of ash falling on our arms out of the car to this point here. What are your first impressions looking back on the last few days?
I think it's been a very, very steep learning curve. And kind of, a learning curve of learning all the different skills kind of within like science communication and making sure that we like accurately communicate all the facts of the eruption and kind of staying on top of different media interviews and that sort of thing. So that's definitely been a very, very steep learning curve. But also I think like personally, I probably like speak for all of us that we've kind of changed the way that we almost see the eruption. I think we kind of all got here and we're just like very excited at everything that was going on, and then slowly like the more time that we spent here, we've kind of been really like impacted by the human side of it, and kind of just learning, like individually learning how to navigate this current situation, like depending on our own, personal backgrounds, the different, where we come from, our own perspectives, and like me and Ben have had kind of reported very different perspectives, which I think has been great. And yeah, just kind of like navigating whether we're in the right place at the right time, asking the right questions. Like personally, I kind of started on the first day trying to get as many interviews for my dissertation as possible, whereas now I've kind of realised, now it's not the right time.
That's a really interesting thing to talk about, because when Rosie got here, she decided to change the subject of the dissertation, because obviously this was a fantastic opportunity to do something related to La Palma, obviously. But you decided to do a topic related to memory, which is interesting, which I want to talk to you about, but also how people remember the Teneguía eruption in 1971 compared to what's going on here. And why did you suddenly decide maybe now is not the right time to be having that conversation with people?
I think because it's very difficult for people to kind of think back to, whilst that eruption didn't cause as much devastation, to kind of bring those memories to the forefront of their mind whilst they're currently living through a different eruption, and kind of, it's still a shock. And it being, I think like 11 days since the eruption.
Yeah.
So, people are still kind of living through that. So I think it's a lot kind of better for people that I'm asking the questions to emotionally, for me to kind of wait until I guess like the dust has settled.
Yeah.
We don't know how long the eruption is going to go on for, but I think kind of the more time that I spent living with the hazard, the more people kind of try and find some sort of normality within this kind of disaster area. Because I think at the moment, it's very similar to when we all went into lockdown. It was kind of, it took a while to kind of get used to it and kind of find some sense of normality. So I think asking people to remember.
Say it, Rosie. The new normal. The new normal.
Yeah, the new normal. Just like asking people to kind of think about old memories whilst they're still trying to process current memories. I just didn't really think that was ethically very responsible.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that on previous live streams, that it's always whether you're a researcher or you're just someone tweeting about it or you're a tourist here, then it's really important that you constantly ask yourself, am I asking the right thing? Should I be here? Should I be talking about this? Is this the right time for me to tweet about this, to ask about this? And it's definitely something that I've had to kind of learn and navigate and kind of figure that all out along the way, and always kind of remember my own positionality in all of this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And actually I think just from watching you evolve over the last few days, what's been interesting is once you took that decision, it kind of changed your focus, so you really were in the moment and focusing on what's happening now rather than trying to juggle 10 things at once. So I think that probably helped as well, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And kind of just, once I kind of decided that I wanted to stay for a bit longer and didn't have all of the excess pressures, that I could actually, be here right now and process everything that was going on. Because I think that's one thing I found really difficult at first, is that I was trying to, juggle so many different things. I wasn't really processing what was going on. So I found it, incredibly challenging emotionally to kind of those first few days. And like it still is a challenge, but I think with less kind of things to focus on, I have more time to kind of be present here and make peace with what's going on before I leave.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good. And what about you, Ben? How's when you look back, obviously you're not in the same place right now than you were, a few days ago.
No.
How do you view that journey that you've been on the last 5 days or so?
Yeah, I mean the sort of overwhelming, I guess, thought is it's been a steep learning curve, as Rosie said. I think it's been it's been the ultimate sort of case study of, I guess, learning by doing. you know, we've just had to be pragmatic and adapt to sort of what, you know, the changing schedule, the changing, you know, situation here. I think it's been really interesting for me personally to sort of change the way I think about, you know, about reporting and how news is reported and things like this are reported, because, you know, I guess quite naively, you know, I would assume that, you know, people, you know, I mean, we're here to report, you know, as accurately and put everything, you know, into context, you know, even if it seems, you know, more boring than the headlines that people want, and you know, I guess coming here, I maybe naively thought, you know, that's maybe how all reporting sort of strives to be, you know, so it's just interesting seeing. You know, seeing the I guess the real side to that. I think one of the examples was a few days ago where the volcano went through, you know, a period of inactivity. We were sort of all very cautious, like, you know, we can't really say what this means, you know, let's just wait and see. Whereas, you know, the news channels all around us were going a bit crazy, you know, speculating that the eruption had ended and all sorts.
So they wanted to be the first with the headline, didn't they?
Yeah.
The end of the eruption. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's you know, critical thinking in that respect is something, you know, I've learned a lot, and just thinking about how things are reported and how it affects people.
Yeah, and that's actually, I think, some of the miscommunication between scientists and journalists come about, because obviously a journalist is after a tidy story to be told in a very few words, hopefully with a dramatic headline which will catch people's attention, whereas science is all about being accurate, precise, and using rather long words which don't translate very well into the media sometimes. So yeah, it is a tricky one.
Yeah, I think I've definitely learned how to, you know, be absolutely concise in my explanations, and, you know, because I find that if you try to go too in depth into things, especially, you know, talking to, you know, a non-expert, say, then normally you end up with the wrong parts being emphasised. So you just have to really nail it down, like, right, what's the really key information, and to do that, you know, you have to truly, you know, understand what you're on about, you know, because it is, you know, if you don't really understand something you're trying to explain yourself, you've got no chance to
simplify it.
To simplify it and explain it to
And that was, as a non-scientist myself, I certainly saw that in all the reporting about the lava hitting the sea. I mean, there's a real furor about, oh my goodness, what would the gases mean? And, you know, they had long lists of these very toxic gases that were supposedly in the steam, but actually when it comes down to it, you know, it was in a very low concentration and would only affect a very small area. But you didn't understand that from reading some of the international press, and that was always something high up on the agenda. You know, when they'd introduce a story, it's like, oh my goodness, you know, La Palma's on lockdown, and you know, there's all these toxic gases heading towards them, and all the rest of it. And there's also another sidelines as well, a side comment I wanted to make about La Palma being decreed a disaster area. And I think that's worth mentioning on here, because that's also been on a lot of the news networks, and that doesn't mean that the whole of La Palma is devastated. It basically means that it's a technical term which enables people to make claims very quickly through their insurance companies. So by declaring it that way, it just sort of means that people can access those funds faster than if it wasn't, because actually people here are quite concerned to make sure that any money that is available is made available quickly to them. So that's good. So what do we reckon's on the plan for tomorrow? It's our last day here. I think you've still got a bit more material you want to collect in terms of interviews and maybe seeing some different angles. I think what's been tricky today is that we've had a lot of kalima, so there's been a lot of dust in suspension, so we haven't wanted to spend too much time near the volcano today either. Although when we were there earlier, you did recognise some new activity going on, didn't you? then, and some sort of some clouds of gas coming out the northern flank, and you were wondering about what that might mean.
Yeah, you're right. So sort of as we got there, the northern flank of the volcano sort of was just below the central vent, and I think it's ongoing. There's a lot of gases, coming out the side of the rock and of the cone. So I spoke to Alexis about it. He said, when there's gases coming out like that, seemingly, after fume rolls that sort of haven't been there before, it kind of suggests to us that there might be, magma near the surface there that's trying to escape. So there's, we can't really speculate too much, but potentially that could be an area that you may look at if you think, is there going to be a new vent come up in the eruption?
Yeah, because these, I heard the phrase you guys talking about that it could be quite unstable. These scoria cones, is that right, on these type of eruptions?
Yeah, so I mean the cones are quite unstable, and we've seen we've seen already sort of the morphology, the shape of the cone change quite dramatically. With small fractures forming and then being widened in the cone, and numerous sort of very small collapses of materials inwards, during periods of intense activity, say. So there's potential if the event was to open up there, there could be some sort of hopefully small collapse.
Okay, and that probably explains as well why we've had different events opening up, and they've lost count of how many different ones some opened up and stopped and started and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
That's just a normal evolution. I mean, when I think of volcanoes in my mind, I just think of a cone spewing lava out into the sky. So it's been quite interesting to see all these different jets starting and stopping.
Yeah.
But that's a normal basaltic eruption, is it?
Yeah, it's a normal fissure eruption. So the cones constantly changing shape as the materials being added to it, through explosions of material upwards, and the wind direction influences a lot where that gets deposited sort of close to the cone, and at the same time these explosions are also causing disruptive changes. So it's a constantly evolving landscape, although over short time scales it may look fairly stable. In fact, these are unstable, and because the magma follows the sort of path of least resistance to the surface, you often get old vents being blocked, new vents opening up, throughout the course of the eruption. That's just typical of these type of eruptions.
Brilliant. Right, I'm just going to do a little panoramic shot, see if we can see a little bit, because although we've had Kalima all day, I think it's going to be quite difficult to see. There we are. We can still see the volcano up there, and the lava just following its pathway down to the sea and pouring into the sea down there. And there's a platform that's being created there. And I think Alexis was saying earlier that it'll spread out a certain distance, but then the sea bed becomes very steep, and at that point it'll continue getting wider if material keeps being dumped into the sea, but it won't necessarily go much further out, because it would have to be a huge amount of material that would need to be deposited in order to get a lot further out. So you have to think about how steep that ocean floor is not far from the coast of La Palma, to realise that actually we might be ending up with a wider rather than longer platform. Okay, well I think that's probably, if there aren't any questions from all the people who are joining us. Hola Samu, te veo. Gracias por tus fotos, son extraordinarias. Samu, our photographer from 2 nights ago, is with us. and I just wanted to say a quick hello. I've been talking to some photo agencies in London, so we'll keep you informed of how we get on with his photographs in order to make some additional donations to the charities here, because I know some of you have been asking about that, and we will keep you updated on that because that's something important. Pero desde La Palma, from La Palma, the beautiful isle, I think we'll say good night for tonight, and send us any questions again over social media if you have any questions, so that we can address them tomorrow, because tomorrow will be our last night here, and we've got some celebrations here we need to get underway for Rosie's birthday. So we might go and do that. So it's goodbye from Ben.
Goodbye, thanks for tuning in, everyone.
And goodbye from Rosie.
Bye.
And goodbye from me and all of us, all the GeoTenerife team here. Thank you for joining in, everybody. See you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.